Hello and welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers, the podcast for those curious about creating a more fulfilling work life. Every business boils down to two basics, people and money. Here we focus on the human side. Numbers matter, but people matter most, and people drive performance. I'm Susan Riadon, your host, a coach, consultant, facilitator and author of Leading Beyond the Numbers. It brings me joy to speak to people and explore together how, although we share many similarities as humans, each of us navigates the world through our own unique lens. This adds intricacy to our interactions and contributes to both the depth and difficulties of interpersonal relationships. Join us for stories, strategies, and insights to help you lead your life beyond the numbers.
And so I got up at this marketing talk in front of 500 people, and I was talking about naked and the model, and it was all going fine. And then I looked down at the audience, first mistake, and someone in the front row just looked bored. And it threw me. And I lost my train of thought. The voice started to go dry. And then the voice went, and I just froze on stage in front of 500 people. And obviously just wanted the stage to swallow me up there and then.
Hello, and welcome to episode 210 of Life Beyond the Numbers. And this episode is going out on September 28th, 2025. And I've decided to go into the archives for this episode. You just heard a little snippet there from episode 64, Being Yourself with Eamon FitzGerald. This episode is one of those episodes that has stayed with me all these years. It went out first in November 2021. And I've also included part of Eamon's story in my book, Leading Beyond the Numbers, in chapter 6. I remember distinctly having this conversation with Eamon, and when he talked about being on stage and freezing in front of all of those people, it was one of those moments that I knew was going to stand out. And there's something very powerful about someone being vulnerable and sharing their stories of where something in their life happened and there was a change because of that. The other reason I wanted to put it out now is because I follow Eamon on LinkedIn, and if you don't follow him, he's definitely worth following. He always puts out quality content, and most recently I noticed that he is planning on expanding into the UK. So he's bringing WineSpark that he started in Ireland into the UK. And his most recent post was about how most startups raise money from the wrong people, and choosing the right investors is one of the most critical yet least talked about decisions, he says, that you make in business. Conventional wisdom says to go to friends and family and so on. And he said he was about to do that until his former boss, Rowan Gormley, gave him some priceless advice and told him that the best early investors are your suppliers. And Eamon says he was absolutely right. And one of the things that perhaps your suppliers understand more than investors is that building a quality business takes time. So we're going to hear from Eamon. This episode was recorded a number of years ago, back in 2021. And if you've listened to it before, I'm sure you'll get something from it again. And if you've never heard it before, it's worth a listen. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a fellow Irish person, Eamon FitzGerald. Eamon, you're most welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers.
Oh, thanks, Susan. It's great to be here.
Cool. So I came across Eamon first when I moved to the UK, and we started to buy wines from a company called Naked Wines. And earlier this year, Eamon announced that he was heading for Ireland and going to set up alone. And it was as if somebody I knew was leaving, because even though I'd never spoken to Eamon or met him, his emails had encouraged me to connect with winemakers around the world and appreciate wine. I mean, I already appreciate it, don't get me wrong, but in a way that I felt connected to him and producers and a sense of community about something I'm passionate about as well. So I wanted to talk to Eamon about Naked, but also about his new venture. And as I researched this episode, one of the things that stood out most for me, as I said, is this sense of community, this personal connection, which I think is wonderful in the world we live in today, which is often very disconnected. So Eamon, tell us, how do you create that personal connection?
So I think wine as a topic and a product, it just lends itself perfectly to a community-based business. And if you drink wine, it generally goes hand in hand with good times. It's refreshing on a hot day. It's comforting on a cold night. It's part of people's holidays, birthdays, weddings, celebrations, all sorts. And it's most importantly, it's a product which is generally consumed in a group, whether with friends or family. And I'm very passionate about, bringing great wine to those social occasions and giving a bit more meaning to that wine. So whether it reminds you of that amazing holiday or honeymoon you had, or dinner with your family, or whatever it is. So it just lends itself perfectly to creating a community. And in our world, it's the customer drinking the wine, it's the winemaker who's making the wine, and then it's someone like me in between, kind of connecting those two groups together.
I guess it's wines that we wouldn't normally find in our supermarkets as well. We're somehow getting connected to wines that we may never have been exposed to. So how have you found these winemakers over the years, Eamon?
I spent 10 years in the UK with a company called Naked Wines. I did every job there, from the wine buyer up to the managing director. So it gave me amazing experience doing everything in a fast growing company. And down the years, I met some of the world's most talented independent winemakers. Became colleagues, friends with those guys. So got great contacts all over the world through that. But I also learned the commercials of making wine. So how much wine costs to make in every region on earth, and how to actually make it great value for the customer.
So you've travelled extensively then as well, Eamon. I mean, every continent, I guess, or wine producing area.
Yeah, every place they make wine, I've probably been there. And the great thing about traveling in the wine business, they tend to be beautiful places, first of all. The food tends to go hand in hand with the wine. So those experiences are special. And also the people. So, when you're with a winemaker in Italy or South Africa, they're so passionate about where they're from, their region, or their part of the world. They're honored that you have traveled such distances to visit them. So they want to make sure that you experience the best of, those regions. And it's not necessarily the Michelin star restaurant. It's the pokey cafe in the village behind the petrol station that serves up the most amazing pasta imaginable. And I love bringing those experiences and those stories and those wines back to people who actually drink the stuff. And whether they're in Italy next time and they might get to experience the same thing, like experience the place like a local rather than a tourist, or, quite simply just getting delicious wine into their glass so that they kind of know then, a bit of the story behind what they're drinking. That's what really gets me up in the morning.
And was that something you always wanted to do, Eamon? How did you get into the wine industry?
Yeah, it's funny. I guess from a young age, not too young, but I think wine was always something I wanted to get into. And the first time the bug bit, I think, was when I was a teenager. My dad would head over to France to do those booze cruises. I don't know if you remember them back in when, like, this is late 90s probably, or And he could get their cash together and someone would drive over in a van and collect a load of cheap wine from the wine warehouses and bring them back and have their year's supply of wine. And I was probably just on hand one day and I was appointed unofficial wine buyer for that trip. And got the catalog out, and I just started looking up the different vintages and the deals and the value and stuff you'd get. And yeah, one of the trips actually he brought me and my brother. So got the boat over to northern France and did the D-Day beaches and had a beautiful experience. Just trip with the lads, and we load up the Jeep then and the trailer full of wine. Yeah, the back seat would have like two children shaped wine box holes in them, just so Dad could literally fit every last box possible. I swear he looked at one box and I could leave a child behind and bring more wine home. No, he didn't. But you know what I mean? Every last cubic centimeter was used. A couple of runs up the ramp trying to get on the ship because we were so laden down. And yeah, then we get home back to Dublin and we open the loot and unpack it. And it's just something about pulling those bottles out of each box, looking at the label, looking up these wine books at these, amazing sounding places like Saint-Emilion and Gigondas, and reading up about them and all that stuff. Just, I don't know, it just seemed quite magical to me. And I was 15 or 16. I hadn't even drunk a drop yet, but just the very notion of it just really appealed to me. So then through uni, then I had a part-time job in a wine shop. So that got me further into it. I did a harvest in the south of France when I was 20. So picked grapes for 4 or 5 weeks. That was backbreaking work and horrendous, but it definitely gave me a good insight to the toil that goes into making wine. And then it wasn't until I was 3 years out of college. I'd been working for Accenture for 3.5 years as a management consulting. Great experience, learned lots, but I knew wine was still that passion, what I really wanted to do. So I moved to London with my girlfriend, now wife, Ruth, and became a customer of this company called Naked Wines, and got invited to a tasting like with the other customers. At the time, I'd also been writing a wine blog called My Grape Escape. And this was all about trying to get out of the corporate world into wine. And so I'd review, like, it wasn't a serious thing, but I'd review the wine list at Legs, which is like this awful like late night wine bar
in Leeson Street.
That you'd always end up in and no one wanted to admit it. And you swear you'd never do it again. And then, or else like the wine list or the little quarter bottles on the CityJet flight on the way home from London on a Friday night. Just do stuff like that. And so at Naked, I went to this first taste and wrote up a review of the tasting and the wines afterwards. And a guy called Rowan Gormley, who founded Naked, saw that blog and he got in touch and we met up for a beer. And 4 months later, I was working for him. So that was how I got into wine, and it was a fun journey.
Amazing. There's so much in there. Any standout trips that you've made, or wine producers that would never have been discovered that you found?
Yeah, there's loads down the years. One of my favorite places is probably in Ribera del Duero, which is northern Spain. That's the wine region. You know, a couple of great winemakers there. But there's this lamb restaurant in the region in a little village called Lerma. And the restaurant is called Casa Anton. And I've been there a couple of times now. You walk down an unassuming side street and there's a door you never think is a restaurant, but you're brought in. The place is half empty. It's full of like old fellas. There's like flies and just checkered tablecloths, and very down to earth place. And you go and you sit down and you wait for the menu. There's no menu that comes. Carafe of wine is brought out to you. It's this kind of dark pink local juice from the cooperative. And then the food's brought out. So simple green salad, crusty white bread, and then this lamb is kind of thrown down in front of you in a big sharing place for the group. And if there's any vegetarian listeners, maybe hit the fast forward button for 30 seconds or a minute. But this lamb it's the lamb capital of Spain, this region, Ribera del Duero. And the lamb, it's called lechuza. So it is milk fed, 60 days old, slaughtered the day before you eat it, and then roasted in its own juices for 7 or 8 hours in these clay ovens in the restaurant, and just served up like that, melt in the mouth. And then the wine on it, the wine's quite rough on its own, but then you sip it along with the lamb and everything just falls into place. And you're just in heaven, food and wine heaven. And it's, again, one of these experiences that you get knowing the locals and kind of traveling that way. And I love telling people about that. I tell people to go visit that place if they ever want to try the best lamb in Spain, go to Casa Anton. In Lerma. Yeah, they're the sort of place. It's a far cry from the chateaus in Bordeaux and the sports cars in Napa Valley and all that flash kind of part of the wine business, which is no doubt it's amazing as well, but that's not my world, and that's not many people's world.
No, except it's the world of the supermarkets, I guess, to an extent, Eamon. It's about numbers, isn't it? It's about what you can ship through, margins and so on. So what makes what you're doing different?
Yeah, so I like to say with my new venture, WineSpark, with wine, you get what you pay for. And the reality of the wine industry is 80% of wine purchased is in the supermarket and consumed within 90 minutes of it of being brought home. The average price point in the UK is about £5.50. So in there, there's about, once you take away duty and taxes and shipping and glass, there's about 20 pence of actual wine in there. And the average bottle of wine, served up in the UK. And once you hit £7, you're getting a £1.70 worth of wine. The increments you get in just increasing the price a little bit. So that's where the majority of the market is at. Then there's like a 15% above that, which is the middle players, the Majestic wines, the Naked wines, Virgin wines, Laithwaites, all those guys who are battling it out on the e-commerce space. And then there's 5% on the top, which is like super premium high end. So it's like a pyramid, the way the market is set up. So Naked wines, we were at the middle part of that pyramid and still are, and do knock it out of the park at the £7 to £12 price point. I always looked at the top of that pyramid to go, right, the best wines out there, they obviously cost the most amount of money. But knowing what I do about the economics of making wine, no wine on this planet, if made correctly, should cost more than about $25 to make. So what I mean by that is if you take Napa Valley in California, it's the most expensive place on earth to make wine. And if you want to buy top class grapes in Oakville or somewhere really nice in Napa, it's about $18,000 a ton for the very best grapes that money can buy. That's about $15 in the bottle. Then you got to process it, state of the art winemaking facility. It's about $2.5 a ton. That's another $2 on the bottle. Oak barrels, $800-900 a barrel. That's another $2 or $3 in the bottle. And then your packaging, heavyweight bottle, cork the size of a vibrator, really throw the kitchen sink at it, it's another $2 a bottle. So you come out with about $25 with change for the best wine that money can buy. Yet that wine in certain channels sells for hundreds, if not thousands. So you got this absolute ceiling on what great wine actually costs to make. But when you want to, as a customer, experience the very best wines to actually buy and taste them, they'll cost you several multiples of that. So with my new venture, WineSpark, I wanted to maybe turn that on its head and go, how can I make these incredible wines accessible and affordable to regular people like you and I? That was really the spark for how WineSpark got going.
The spark, excellent. And for a small wine producer, then let's take somebody like in northern Spain, in the area you're talking about. Are they imagining ever scaling their business, or are they just looking for steady income?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably two ends of the wine market. There's the mass produced, like super cheap, high volume wine produced in factories. Basically, it's made to a recipe, tastes the exact same year in, year out, and that heads off to the supermarket. On the other end, you've got the real smaller, independent producers. And it sounds idyllic being a winemaker. It's a tough life, backbreaking work in fields, a lot of cleaning in the winery. That'll tell you winemaking is 90% cleaning and 10% magic. But the rest of the time, and the majority of the time, is spent actually trying to sell their wine. And yes, there's a golden rule in the wine world. The best winemakers are the worst salespeople. And vice versa, if someone turns up in a slick suit with their wines and a well-executed sales pitch, you run a mile because like this can't be right. So yeah, winemakers, they're amazing at making stuff, and they're at their happiest in the cellar, in the fields, tending to their grapes or their barrels or their tanks. Yeah, but selling is such a big effort for them. And that's where someone like me comes in, where I can taste, I can extract a story from a winemaker, and then connect them in with the people who are actually drinking the stuff, and take out all the intermediaries, the agents, the marketers, all that stuff in the middle, who add a lot to the cost, but not much to the price and the quality. So yeah, that's how the industry works. And it's kind of a vicious cycle for the winemaker. Because they're small, they can't afford to make a lot of wine and then try to sell it. The more they try to sell, the more that adds on to the cost of the wine. Therefore, the wine ends up more expensive on the shelf. So it's a vicious cycle that it's hard to get out of, and no one really wins. The customers drinking expensive wine, winemaker isn't selling much. And at the end of the day, people just head back to the supermarket and go, do you know what, I'll stick with my six pound Pinot Grigio and away with me.
And I guess people will also say that they don't taste the difference. between the 6-bottle Pinot Grigio and the 36-pound bottle Pinot Grigio, you know, that's the other thing.
That's definitely true. And that, like 80% of the market who buys at the supermarket, wine is just a means to an end of, and that's perfect. You know, it's the drink on a Friday night just to cool off after work. It's, you know, it's just another drink. There is a part of the market that likes cooking good food, likes traveling, likes good wine. And wine is it's intimidating, it's confusing, it's hard to get into. But once you're in that world, it's exciting and it's romantic and it's aspirational. And yeah, it's not for everyone, but anyone who likes those sort of things can get into wine.
You became MD of Naked Wine then, quite quickly as well, and quite young.
Yeah, so first job at Naked, for the first year, I was the wine development manager. So I was traveling all over the world, finding winemakers for our very fast growth at the time. After a year, Rowan went off to the US to set up Naked Wines USA over there. And for some reason, he picked me to run the company, aged 26 or 27, with no experience of running a team, let alone a company. But he must have seen something in me, because I definitely didn't see it myself. And we can talk about Rowan, but one of the great things he always taught me is that you value attitude over experience. And he could have hired someone a lot older and a lot more experienced than me, but he didn't. I think it worked out well. But it wasn't going so well at the start. So I hadn't a clue what to do, which is probably quite normal. You know, it's 35 people, there's 25,000 customers, about 30 million in sales, and suddenly you're supposed to run the thing. And it took probably one of the most humiliating experiences of my life to really, I don't know, change a gear or something happened. So I was invited to speak at this marketing festival down in London. And I'm quite introverted, so public speaking like just terrified me. And so I had to get up in front of 500 people to like just talk about Naked Wines. And I'd done a couple before, they'd gone well, obviously terrified before them, but I did okay. And I think the biggest mistake I was making in the early days of being a managing director was, and I see it, so many people do it kind of going into new roles, is you try to be someone else or you try to be the person who's just maybe vacated that role. So Rowan is this charismatic, entrepreneurial, softly spoken South African, set up 3 businesses for Richard Branson at Virgin, created Naked, awesome idea, and just such a presence, big shoes to fill. So not having a clue what else to do, it's like, well, I'm just going to try and be Rowan. And so I got up at this marketing talk in front of 500 people, and I was talking about Naked and the model, and it was all going fine. And then I looked down at the audience, first mistake, and someone in the front row just looked bored, and it threw me. And I lost my train of thought. The voice started to go dry, and then the voice went, and I just froze on stage in front of 500 people. And obviously just wanted the stage to swallow me up there and then. And yeah, I've kind of recovered it and battled through the last 5 or 6 minutes, and all fine in the end. But sat down afterwards, and I'd had a mare. Like I was just sitting there going, that was awful. And I was speaking with a guy called Matthew Phelan, and he kind of just like, bigging me up and trying to pull me back. And he was like, people were loving what you were talking about, especially the winemaker. And I was like, oh yeah, thanks, whatever. I appreciate it. But as I reflected on that experience, I thought, that there was something in that. And I was at my most comfortable talking about the winemakers and their stories rather than the business model and the funding and all that stuff. So I thought, right, next time I'm up on stage, I'm going to talk about the winemakers because people love that bit, and that's what I should focus on. So I realized I needed to be more not Rowan and be more authentically me and really play up what I'm passionate about. And those speeches are a walk in the park when I do that. And it just so happens, as it turns out, being authentically me means more sales when it comes to marketing and everything. So that was a big lesson I learned early on. It took a very tough learning experience, but that sense of being yourself, for all its flaws and all its good things as well, that was a huge learning for me early on.
Wow, thank you for sharing that story. And I can't imagine I can standing up and with 500 people and freezing, but everybody in the audience is probably thinking, thank God that wasn't me.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
The poor guy. I think we always want people who are talking to us to do well, and we're just glad it's not us. And a brilliant lesson, Eamon, and to learn it very early, because I think if you go into a business and you're working your way up, like you say, you're trying to fill the shoes the whole time. And when you get to be yourself, you don't even know who that is any longer. So it's fantastic that you got that. And also I read something about a book you bought that helped you along the way. Maybe you tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, this was early days as well. Again, looking for results, didn't really know what I was doing, but I just took to like reading, going to events, just throwing myself into as many things as possible to learn as much as possible. I came across this book called If Disney Ran Your Hospital by this guy called Fred Lee. And he was a hospital consultant in the US in a private hospital. And he wanted to figure out how to improve the patient experience at his hospital in order to, create better business in the hospital. So he did a stint at Disney to learn from Disney how they treat their customers and how he could translate that experience to a very different environment, obviously a hospital environment, but what principles he could bring over. He noticed one very interesting thing Disney did, which was every time you finished and this is probably in the 80s or 90s, every time you had a stay at Disney, you were asked to rate that experience out of 5 stars. And Disney found through that data over time that the difference between a customer that rated that experience 4 stars versus 5 stars, the customer was 7 times more likely to book again if they had a 5-star experience. That was a big light bulb moment for Disney. So they put everything into how to give a 5-star experience for their guests rather than a 4-star experience. So little things like obviously amazing service, call them out by their name. If the car is driving into the parking lot, they see a sticker for the college on the bumper, they make a comment on that, putting things right when things are all that stuff to make a 5-star experience. So I thought that was very interesting. So I dug into the data at Naked because we also at the time measured our customers on experiences on a 1 to 5 scale. And I saw in the data with retention levels twice as good for 5-star customers versus 4-star customers. However, we paid our agents based on a positive experience, which was 4 and 5 stars rather than 5-star only. So I thought, let's give this a shot. The new target, guys, is a 5-star experience, not a 4 and 5-star. Here's a few ideas or tactics to help you deliver that 5-star experience. And within 2 weeks, the 5-star number went from 65% to 85%. And suddenly we created incredible experiences for our customers, but also incredible culture in the business. And not unlike what we've seen over the last 18 months, where people suddenly appreciate the hospital staff and the retail frontline workers and stuff, how they're the real heroes of society. And a bit like in any company, the call center tends to be an afterthought. Whereas when we realized, Christ, look at the value these guys are delivering, they became the heroes of the company because they were suddenly creating value, not just minimizing brand damage through dealing with difficult issues. So the numbers shot up, the culture changed overnight, and Naked became known, and still is to this day, one of the best customer service teams in the company. And I say customer service, I shouldn't say that because we renamed the team as well, Customer Happiness Team, because that's their job. It's to make customers happy. And again, this sounds a lot more positive and aspirational. And the guys to this day still do an amazing job, and I'm very proud of all of them for keeping that up.
That's amazing. And you said the culture and the business changed, so it spread beyond the customer happiness team as well.
Yeah, looking into some data, businesses are complex beasts, but at the end of the day, if you can boil it down to a few simple things, just focus on those things, that's always been my recipe. And, again, I was digging into data one day and I looked into our NPS data, the Net Promoter Score, because I was just wondering, well, what makes our best customers, our highest NPS scores, what makes them love the business so much? Naked's got a very high NPS score. And I looked into the 9s and 10s, and the 2 reasons why people loved the business so much were the wine and the service. So that's not surprising. But what did surprise me was it was wine and service in the same amount. So I thought the wine would be like way above the service. So simple things like great service on the phone, next day delivery, good website, very simple stuff, not rocket science, but very few people actually get that right. So again, just building the business, building the experiences around amazing wine and amazing service. That was the focus. That was the goal down the years, and that shines through with the brand. This huge, retention, great quality wines, amazing culture and attitude from people. And then just little things you just throw in to keep that like discipline and stuff together. So I read a great book called Legacy by James Kerr. It's about the All Blacks and how they keep an amazing kind of leadership culture going within the rugby team. And the first passage is amazing. It describes the 2011 World Cup opening game where the All Blacks played Wales, and the whole country's buzzing. It was down in New Zealand. The All Blacks had a great victory, and describe a scene 2 hours after the match where everyone's out in the pubs partying and fireworks going off, everyone's celebrating the win, everyone gone home from the stadium. But the 3 team captains are in the changing rooms, cleaning up the changing rooms, tidying up the rubbish and putting it all away and getting it right for the next day. And they're the leaders of that business, and they call it sweeping the sheds. And it's like their attitude is, if we don't do this, someone else is going to do it. Why should they? We're the leader of this team. We should leave it, right for the next day and the next person. And little things like that. So the office kitchen, for example, it's a stage in every office out there. And we're going to the size where we could afford a cleaner to keep the office kitchen tidy. And I thought, no, do you know what? There's leaders in this company. We all show individual leadership at any point. People will wash up and clean after themselves rather than we pay someone else to do that for us. Meetings, every single meeting starts on time. I don't care if the CEO is late for the meeting. The meeting starts 5-10 minutes late. You've lots of meetings a week. You add all that up, that's a lot of wasted time and disrespect for other people. And 2, if you got a meeting with a customer at 2:00, you better be on that call at 2:00 for that customer. So you set that tone, you set that discipline, that culture, internally. So I was very picky on that sort of thing down the years, little things like that, but I think they go a long way, and they just help. They keep that culture, they keep those disciplines and that behavior.
Well, you're setting boundaries really, Eamon, aren't you, as well, about what is and isn't acceptable, and you're communicating them too. So everybody's aware of them, so it's easier then to adhere to them.
Yeah, for sure. And that starts from the top. And I ain't perfect by any stretch, but
I
look at the guy above me, Rowan, who we did a big deal with Majestic Wine back in 2015. So they bought us for about 100 million. And it was a huge day. Obviously, we had previous owners that they were struggling, and we'd gone hard in the US as well. So there were some tough times before we did that deal. So it was amazing. One of the best days of my career, handing out checks to people and with shares and all that stuff. But one of the highlights of that whole period and that day, I'll never forget it, was, so Rowan and the team, they'd be down in London doing the deal overnight, lawyers and everyone. They announced it to the stock market at 8:00 on the Friday morning. We were all up in Norwich getting the comms ready for customers, telling staff when they came in, all those mad stuff from a day like that. And Rowan had done his morning stuff and interviews and all that, and he got the train back up to Norwich in that afternoon. And what really struck me was he spent that whole time responding to customers on his wall who were going, yeah, congrats, great news, or I'm really worried, this sounds like terrible news, and what does this mean for Naked and my wines and winemakers? And Rowan was all day on his wall responding to customers, where he could have been talking to every business analyst or journalist in the country wanted to talk to that day. And I saw that, and the whole team saw that, and that sort of leadership. And yeah, those experiences stick with you. And that's what I mean by that top down. If you expect people to uphold your kind of standards and behaviors, you better do it yourself. And yeah, I took that from him. I tried to do it myself as well. And it's not rocket science. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't get it right. But yeah, upholding those standards is very important.
And you worked at Accenture for a while, Eamon, and that, I worked in Deloitte, and I don't think that they, certainly in the last century when I worked there, but they weren't the qualities of leadership that you were seeing. So also, depending on where you spend your early career, can shape you. And it's back to you saying being yourself as well, isn't it? And this isn't rocket science, but if you think about, well, the customers are the ones that are keeping us in business, and the staff are the ones that are keeping this business running, and the suppliers, they're all people. That's what they are. So treat them well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
And so, Eamon, what was the spark then to send you back to Ireland and start your own venture?
Yeah, we moved back to Ireland in 2018 with two small kids in Norwich. So we figured it was time to move back for family reasons. And I've moved into a global wine director role instead of MD to be able to work for Naked from Dublin. So I was gone 2 out of 4 weeks every month. It was a bit too much, but again, just created loads of great contacts and experiences. But then obviously the pandemic hit and that all came to a start, and we were all stuck at home with plenty of time, too much time to think about our lives and what's next. And I've been 10 years at Naked, so I get naturally maybe start to think about what's the next move here. And yeah, it was in May of last year. We were just coming out of the first lockdown and slowly edging out of our houses again, and couldn't go very far, so hanging out with neighbours. And on our road, a little cul-de-sac where we were at the time in Dunleary in Dublin, we decided just to do drinks every Friday night with the neighbours. So like kids would be running around and we pour drinks. And I'd obviously have lots of wine in the house, as you can see behind me, and it'd been sent samples all the time. So I was like, guys, why don't I just do a wine tasting? Bring a glass, keep your distance, and I'll pour you some nice wines. So we did that every Friday night. And yeah, I'd be pouring wines for people. I'd be, explaining the difference between the Rioja and the Ribera del Duero. I'd be explaining the winemaker story. I'd be helping people, find a white wine that they love. And it struck me that like I'm at peak happiness doing this, just sharing great wines with people and telling the stories. And I thought, right, this is what I love doing. It was a good reminder, having been locked up for so long. Also, probably selfishly, is back in Ireland and kind of didn't see a wine supplier out there that could give me the value and the sort of community that I'd like as a consumer of wine. And then finally, this idea of great wine is so expensive, it shouldn't be. Why don't I create a business model that makes these amazing wines suddenly accessible and affordable to normal people like me, my neighbors, yourself, everyone else? And I realized that the key to unlocking that value is to connect these amazing winemakers that I know with the passionate wine drinkers that I also know. And creating that spark, that connection, is what WineSpark's all about. So it's a simple model. It's a subscription. You pay €10 a month. That gives you access to the wine at cost, essentially. So all the taxes and duty and delivery included in the bottle, but no margin on the bottle. I make my margin from the monthly fee rather than the bottle price. And that gives you access. A €30 wine in the shop would cost you 17 or 18 at WineSpark. A €50 wine in the shop would cost you 25 at WineSpark, and so on. So you give people great value in return for that monthly commitment. And there's no tie-ins or minimum terms. You can cancel whenever you want, but hopefully people won't, because I can blow them away with the quality of the wine and the service, which is what I learned at Naked as the two most important things for customer loyalty. So yeah, we're 3.5 months in now. We've got about 450 customers, and the feedback's been great on the wine. And we had our first event a few weeks ago in Dublin and got a few winemakers over. So that was amazing to just bring it to life. And yeah, I'm having a blast doing what I love doing, which is finding amazing winemakers and bringing their wines here and sharing their stories and their wines with people.
Lovely. And I think that's one thing, I said at the beginning about that personal connection I felt to you, even though I'd never met you. And I think it comes across in your newsletters or your emails that you send, because I always felt like you were writing directly to me. And you was probably going to, I don't know how many customers. That's an amazing thing to be able to do. But not only that, you made it, I suppose, informative, and you talk about the winemakers and the experiences I can have. And I believe you. But it's not salesy or sleazy, if you know what I mean. And I think that's going to be something amazing to bring to the Irish.
Yeah, thank you. Let's hope so, for sure. But yeah, it's got to be authentic, right? Back at Naked Wines, we did something with the teams where the marketing team and the buying team were one entity. So a lot of businesses, you'll have a buying team and a marketing team, and the buying team buy, and the marketing team sell. And the marketing team land up generally with what the buying team buy. And there's a lot of friction there, and they're not quite often in coordination the way they should be. Whereas at Naked Wines, the buying decisions were made together between the buying team and the marketing team. Therefore, the marketing could get behind what the buyers are buying because they also made that decision to do so. So it's very important to be in touch with what the customer wants and make those buying decisions together. And yeah, just being authentic, being yourself.
Yeah, and if I am in Ireland now, I mean, obviously there's people listening around the world in different countries. If you're in the UK or in the US, Naked Wines are in both. But if you're in Ireland, how do I find you?
Yeah, so just head over to winespark.com and you can pop in your email address there and you'll go on the email list. Or, you know, if you want to give it a shot, you can sign up as a member for a tenner a month and get going there. I'm also on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and we've got a private Facebook group as well for members where we talk about all our wines and discoveries with the winemakers as well. So that's a bit of fun.
That's cool. I think that's the thing, you know, I have the Naked app and you can leave a review. So one of my favorite wines is the Kruger from South Africa. I just think Kruger wines are unbelievable. And you can leave a message saying that wine was delicious, blah, 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 whatever. And he will respond to you, Johan Kruger, saying, you know, thank you, Susan. And I think that's incredible.
Johan's a lovely guy, and he's so grateful for what Naked have done for him and his family and his business. But he more than pays that back in spades through the quality of his wines. And again, the traditional model where if Johan went to sell a wine in a supermarket or, you know, a nice wine shop, there's several people between him and the end consumer of his wine. So we never actually get to talk to that actual wine drinker. Whereas these direct models allow the maker talk directly to the customer. And the best buzz any winemaker would get is hearing that a customer enjoyed the wine. It was part of a special celebration or a nice dinner or had friends over. Yeah, that's what they do it for. They're expressing part of their world. It's an art form, and it's there for drinking and enjoying. And the other thing with Johan, if you're ever in South Africa, he makes these lamb chops in his backyard on his braai, which is the South African barbecue, grills them over Namibian hardwood. The lamb's from Karoo, so it's Karoo lamb, chops are the size of my head. And you're looking over the sunset over Cape Town, and with a nice bottle of a nice glass of Kruger in tow. Life doesn't get any better than that.
It doesn't. And we have a braai here and we have Namibian hardwood. We don't have the view or the weather. And Eamon, you know, it is coming up to Christmas time and this is going to go out in November. So what would you recommend people to experiment with coming up to Christmas? Any particular winemakers that you'd really like to profile?
Well, I've got an exciting new winemaker I'm about to launch. He's called Federico Cerelli. He's from Tuscany in Italy. And Federico used to make Tignanello and Solaia at Antinori. These two wines are two of the most famous, expensive wines in Italy. And Federico's worked for Antinori, he's worked for Treasury down the years. He's never had a chance to actually make wine under his own until now. So I've got him on board for WineSpark, and he's making 3 beautiful Tuscan wines exclusively for WineSpark customers under his own name. So maybe by the time that this is released, the wines will be on the site. They'll be here in you know, any day now. And I'm very excited to bring those wines to the people of Ireland and give Federico the chance to really express himself and show people what he can do.
Fine. And Eamon, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, and the connection that you're trying to make, or that you are making, between people producing and putting their heart and soul into something they do and people who enjoy the drinking and everything in between is amazing. And I wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate it. And likewise, what you're doing, making people happier at work, and that, you know, that's absolutely what we should all be striving to do. So yeah, right back at you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Eamon. Bye now.
You. All the best.
Thank you for joining me today on Life Beyond the Numbers. If something in this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. It helps others like us discover this podcast and join in our conversation. Until next time, keep exploring the human side of work life.